In the beautiful city of Palo, there lived three best friends called Steve, David, and Michael. The three friends came from the same village, and they also served the same master in the city of Palo. However, 5 years after they were settled by their master to set up their own businesses, they were still struggling to become successful. Each time they traveled back to the village during the festive seasons to meet their families, they often felt ashamed and embarrassed because most of their peers returned to the village with new luxurious cars and designer clothes. But Steve, David, and Michael would always buy only a big loaf of bread for their parents. This made them very ashamed and often made them feel reluctant to travel to the village during the festive season. Even though their parents understood their plight and would often encourage them and advise them to be patient in life. However, they wanted more. They wanted to be like other wealthy men who returned from the city. As December approached once again, the three friends decided to meet at a club where they often met. Steve and Michael got there first. Some minutes later, David arrived in a very luxurious car. When Steve and Michael saw David coming down from the car, they were very shocked because they didn't have enough money to buy a mere motorcycle. So they wondered how and where David got the money to buy an expensive car. When David joined them at the table where they sat, he offered to pay for whatever they would drink and eat that evening. This also surprised Steve and Michael the more because they knew that David was also struggling like the rest of them. Out of curiosity, Steve asked David, "Who owns the car you came with, my guy?" David laughed at his question and answered, "It belongs to me. I own it. I bought it. God has finally answered my prayers. This Christmas would be very different for us." How? The last time I checked, we were all trying to make ends meet. How were you able to afford such a luxurious car in less than 1 year? Guy, it was like a miracle. I sincerely can't explain how it happened, but it can only be God. I got a contract to supply over 1,000 units of television and refrigerator for a new hotel. That's why I said it's a miracle. Steve and Michael rejoiced with him, and together, they all celebrated David's success. They all ate and drank to their fill, and David cleared the bill just as he had promised. However, Steve didn't believe what David said. He found it very difficult and impossible to accept that David got a massive contract just like that without having to suffer and toil for it. The next day, Steve went to see Michael at his shop in the market. Michael was attending to a few customers when Steve came, so he sat and waited for Michael to finish what he was doing. As Steve sat and waited, a lot of things was running through his mind as he saw many shops in the vicinity filled with so many customers who queued up to buy items, while some shops were dry as deserts with their owners dozing off as they waited for customers. Steve, my very good friend, this will be the first time you would visit me during business hours. Hope all is well, Michael asked. Steve took a deep breath and drew closer to Michael. Then he started talking to him in a very low and soft voice so that no one else could hear what they were discussing. "Did you see the car David brought to the club yesterday? I googled the price online. It is worth millions. He's a very lucky man to have landed such contract. I'm sure that his life would never remain the same. He's now one of the big boys in town," Michael replied. "Lucky? Do you seriously believe that David won a contract so easily? The same type of contract that people compete for and even kill each other. David expects us to believe he got it so cheap and easily. No now. What do you mean? Do you think David is lying to us about the source of the money?" Steve looked left and right to be sure that no one was close by. Then he told Michael, "I'm very confident that David got involved in something illegal or spiritual to get the money. Even if it was truly a contract, there must be a sacrifice he made. Christmas is in 2 weeks and David will be traveling to the village with his new car, while the both of us would obviously join in his new car with ordinary bread for our families, whereas David would buy a lot of provisions for his family. What do you think our parents would say when they see David with a new car, but we are still managing to survive?" "I guess you are right, but what can we do?" Do you have any suggestions? Because I don't really like the way business is going. But patience is a virtue, Michael said. Well, you can remain patient in poverty until you die. Or what? Or you can follow me to Ogun State. I've had tales of a very powerful witch doctor called Baba Ayo, who has the power to make anyone rich and wealthy. I'm very sure that David met him as well, because we have once discussed him. Michael became very scared and worried at the mention of a witch doctor. He came from a Christian home, and he was also a devout Christian who didn't joke with the things of God. But this situation was enough to pressure anyone to do whatever it takes to get rich. Are you sure about this? The devil is tricky. His gifts always come with conditions. Michael, what is your problem? What is the most difficult thing he can ask for? You know what? Follow me to see Baba Ayo and listen to what he has to say. Once he mentions anything that doesn't sit well with you, then we'll leave his place and never return. I promise. Steve's word cut through Michael's heart like a hot knife through butter. He thought about all that Steve said and also recalled the shame and ridicule they faced whenever they traveled to the village. He knew that his parents may act comfortable, but deep down in their hearts, they wished he was as wealthy and successful as the other men who returned every year to the village. After thinking for a while, Michael accepted to follow Steve to Ogun State, where Baba Ayo resides. The following weekend, Steve and Michael embarked on a journey to Ogun State to see the famous evil doctor. The journey took a whole day before they arrived at the village where they were told that Baba Ayo resides. When they entered the village, it was very dark already, and the village was very different from all other villages they passed through to find the man. It was an ancient village with old huts scattered around, and elderly men and women living in them. Steve and Michael found it hard to understand why it was only elderly people who were in the village and there were no children. They continued walking down the village, following the direction of the man who had told Steve about Baba Ayo. They had almost given up when they saw a very big and beautiful duplex at the edge of the village, covered with bushes and hidden in plain sight. The two men walked with fear in their hearts to the entrance of the duplex. They were shocked that such a magnificent building could be found in such a remote village. They entered through the gate of the duplex and saw three beautiful women cooking at the corner of the house. The women looked at the men and smiled when they continued their cooking. Steve and Michael didn't understand why they smiled at them, but they continued to the door of the duplex, which opened by itself when they got closer. "Come inside," a thick, husky voice said to them. Michael was very scared. He held Steve by the hand, and together they entered the duplex, where they met an old man seated on one of the luxurious sofas which was in the living room. The old man gestured to two of them to sit down, and then he asked them, "What can I do for you?" Michael was already trembling in fear where he sat. The walls of the living room were decorated with fresh human heads, and the walls, which used to be white, were stained and painted with pure human blood. Steve cleared his throat and said, "We are looking for Baba Ayo. We are told that he has the power to grant us any wish and change our lives." The old man laughed hard at Steve's statement. "Yes, it is true that I have the power to grant any wish and change your lives, but nothing goes for nothing. You must be willing to exchange something to get what you need. I am Baba Ayo, the man that you seek. My friend and I are tired of poverty and the shackles of penury. We want wealth. We want to be rich like our peers. Please, help us," Steve said. Baba Ayo looked at the two men with a smile on his face, but his eyes were more focused on Michael, who was visibly trembling. He looked at Michael closely, and his eyes rested on a small rosary hanging from his neck. But Michael was too focused on the blood on the walls to notice Baba Ayo, who was looking at him. "I can make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. Most of the prominent, popular men you know came to me for their powers and riches. But like I said, there is a price to be paid." Michael looked at Steve. Immediately he heard Baba Ayo say that there is a price to be paid, and he whispered to him, "I'm not ready to kill anyone because of..." But before he could finish his statement, Baba Ayo started laughing heartily. "Yes, I said there is a price to be paid, but it doesn't mean you have to kill anyone. All you need is a white cock and a bottle of pure alcohol and kola nuts. Once you can get all these, I would make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. Steve and Michael looked at him in surprise. They found it very strange that all it took to get rich was something so simple to afford. Baba, are you sure that is all we need? Steve asked. Yes, that is all you need. If you don't have the money for it, I can provide you with all that you need for the rituals. I'm placed in this position to help the less fortunate. Steve was very happy at Baba Ayo's proposal, and Michael was even more happy because it required no bloodshed. They quickly agreed to his proposal, and together they went into a dark red room inside the duplex. There was a small candle which illuminated the room, and on one side of the room was an altar with many carved gods. Steve and Michael were asked to remove their clothes and change into a white lining which they tied around their waists. Baba Ayo gave each of them a white cock, a bottle of alcohol, and a piece of kola nut to chew. After they had finished chewing the kola nuts, he told them to follow him while he led the way. He took them to a river bank where they knelt down, and Baba Ayo flung the white cocks around their head, killed them, poured the blood on their head while he made some incantations. The blood flowed from their head down to their body, staining the white lining which they wore. He then took them to the back of the shrine. When they arrived, he asked them to pour the bottle of alcohol on the carved gods which were arranged inside the strange room. After they were done, he took them into another room which contained almost a dozen coffins. He opened 2 of the coffins and told them, "You would have to sleep here for 3 days. Don't worry about what you would eat or drink. 3 days in the land of the spirit is like 3 hours. When you arise on the 3rd day, you will become wealthier than you can ever imagine." Michael became skeptical and scared. He wanted to turn around, but it was already too late to turn back. "Let's just do this and get over with it. It's just 3 days. We can't come this far for nothing," Steve told Michael, who was already shaking with fear. Michael listened to Steve and accepted to enter the coffin for 3 days. Together, they slowly entered the coffin with their blood-stained lining and laid inside with their face up. Baba Ayo asked them to close their eyes. He blew a white powder on them, and they fell into a very deep sleep before he closed the coffin and left the room. 3 days later, Baba Ayo entered the room once again and opened the coffins. He blew the white substance on them again, and they woke up instantly. Then he took them back into the living room. "Congratulations, you are now billionaires. You will be rich beyond your wildest dreams. However, you need to come and see me to renew your rituals every 6 months." Steve and Michael looked at each other and smiled. Then they thanked Baba Ayo and left the living room. When they entered the compound, they saw the 3 beautiful women once again. They were still cooking, while one of them was pounding something inside a very big mortar. But there was a party being held at the duplex. They saw a lot of popular personalities all seated inside the compound, eating, drinking, and dancing to music. Steve and Michael were very hungry, so they decided to approach one of the women to give them some food before they journeyed back to the city of Palo. When they got to where the women were cooking, they looked inside the pot and they were shocked to their bones. The pot was filled with sweet-smelling pepper soup, but the meat inside the pot was human meat. They saw human hands, legs, ears, heads, and intestines, while one of the women who was pounding was actually pounding a newborn baby in the mortar with blood splattered all over. Michael was extremely shocked and scared that he screamed the name of Jesus. Immediately he shouted, "Jesus!" All the women and the men in the compound turned and looked at him. "Do not ever call that name here," one of the women warned him and tore the rosary which was on his neck. "You have sold your soul to the devil for riches. You are now his servants," another woman told him. Steve and Michael left the compound feeling shocked. As they walked back through the path they came from, they were surprised to see that everything was different. The village they had previously passed was now empty and there was no one in the huts as they walked past, until they got to the road where they boarded a bus back home. They were both too shocked to say anything to each other until they got to their various houses. The next day, when Steve woke up, he saw a message on his phone. It was a credit alert of 100 million naira to supply a company with lots of his merchandise. Steve quickly jumped out of the bed and went to the market to supply the merchandise. The joy of the money made him forget all that he went through at Baba Ayo's residence. Michael wasn't different. He also got a call that morning to sell his merchandise worth millions. Steve and Michael became millionaires overnight. They bought very expensive luxury cars, which were far beautiful than David's car. The next time the three friends met at the club, David was surprised when he saw Steve and Michael. Everything about them showed that they were now very wealthy. David asked them how they became very successful. They told him about the contracts that were coming in, but they didn't tell him about their visit to Baba Ayo. David was very happy for them and thanked God for remembering them too. When it was Christmas, they all traveled to the village with their different cars. As soon as they arrived at the village, they began to spray money, lavishly, bundles of new mint notes. Steve and Michael bought a lot of gifts and provisions, which they gave to their families and the villagers. They spent so much money that they were given a chief title before they left. Their parents were very happy for them, and each time they asked them how they became very wealthy, Steve and Michael would tell them the same story. However, David was reserved in his expenditures. He spent his money wisely and would hardly indulge himself in any reckless spending, unlike Steve and Michael, who were spending money lavishly and without control. Steve and Michael were the talk of the town in the whole village before they left back to the city of Palo. When the three friends returned back to the city, Steve and Michael became well known. They bought many houses and properties. They often traveled abroad to have fun and relax. They employed people to manage their businesses as they were getting contracts almost every week. Life was very sweet for them. 6 months later, Steve was sleeping when he had a very scary dream in which he found himself with his mother and only sister inside a canoe in a very big ocean. They were all laughing and talking until suddenly a great storm came and the ocean started to rock the canoe violently. His mother and sister fell into the ocean and they couldn't swim. They started calling out to Steve to save them, but Steve could only save one person and he became very confused because he didn't know who to choose. As he was still thinking of who to save, they both drowned in the ocean and he woke up breathing very hard and his heart beating very fast. He couldn't sleep again and so he stayed up until morning. Michael also had a similar dream in which he found himself, his mother and his only brother inside a helicopter which was about to crash. There were only 2 parachutes and he had to choose one person between his mother and only brother. As he was trying to make a decision, the helicopter crashed and they all died before he woke up. He woke up with sweat all over his body. In the morning, the 2 friends met each other and narrated the dreams they both had. It then occurred to them that it has been 6 months since they did the rituals and Baba Ayo had instructed them to meet him every 6 months to renew the rituals. They both got prepared and set out on a journey to Ogun State once again to meet Baba Ayo. They recalled the scary things they witnessed the last time and they were even more afraid. On their way, they bought a white coke, a bottle of alcohol and kola nuts for each of them that they would use for the rituals just as they did the first time. When they got to Baba Ayo's residence, they saw the 3 women outside the house again. They were still cooking. Fear gripped Steve and Michael because they knew what was in the pots. They went into the duplex and saw Baba Ayo seated in the living room as usual. They greeted him and kept the items they had bought as they sat down. Baba, we have come as you requested, to renew our rituals and to also thank you for what you did for us. Thank you so much, Baba. Jesus would... But Baba Ayo screamed at Michael when he mentioned the name of Jesus. Do not mention that name here again or there will be consequences. I can see that you brought the items I requested, but there is a little problem. Steve and Michael became confused at Baba Ayo's words. They asked him what the problem was, and what Baba Ayo said next shocked them to their bones. The gods do not require a white cock and the items you bought. They told me that they have shown you what they need in your dreams, and you have to make a decision or lose the both of them. Steve and Michael became very confused. They didn't understand what Baba Ayo meant. But when they remembered the dream they both had, it became very clear to them. You have to choose who you would sacrifice to renew the rituals, or else you would lose the both of them and everything you've gotten from the gods. The two friends looked at each other in shock. They couldn't believe their ears. But you said we wouldn't kill anyone. You promised us that all we needed was a white cock and some minor items, Steve said angrily. I am simply a mouthpiece of the gods. I do not make decisions for them. You have 3 days to make your decision or face the consequences. Baba Ayo gave each of them a clay pot with a red cloth tied to it and instructed them to put the picture of the person they wanted to sacrifice into the clay pot in less than 3 days. Make sure nothing happens to this pot. If it should break, then your life would be over. Steve and Michael returned to the city of Palo with pain and regret in their hearts. They couldn't imagine losing any of their family members because the aim of getting rich was to give their families a comfortable life. They began to question the essence of the wealth if they would have to kill their family members who were supposed to enjoy the wealth with them. But it was too late. They had to make a decision or risk losing everything. After thinking for hours, Steve suggested that they should meet David and ask him where he got his own wealth from. Michael agreed with this idea and together they went to meet David at home. They narrated all that happened to him and they pleaded with him to share with them the name of the witch doctor that helped him. David was very surprised at their words and also disappointed in them. I didn't meet any witch doctor for my wealth. I've been saving for months for the car that I bought. It didn't just happen overnight. And the contract I got, it wasn't easy either. I've been chasing that contract for many months before God helped me. I'm a true Christian who loves God and I would never meet the devil for any reason, no matter how desperate I may be. Steve and Michael felt helpless. Michael felt ashamed of himself for listening to Steve when he suggested that they should meet Baba Ayo. But it was too late for him already to revert his decision. I would advise you guys to go back to God and beg for his forgiveness. At this point, I think he's the only one that can save you. The two friends left David's house in regret. They decided to drive to the nearest church to seek assistance. But on their way to the church, they had a very terrible accident and they both lost their lives. Their bodies were burned beyond recognition. All that they had was destroyed mysteriously and their families gained nothing from their existence. The moral lesson of this story reminds us that it is not always right to assume that our friends made wealth through illegal means, and thereby using that as an encouragement to pursue wealth in illegal ways. True success comes from hard work and integrity, not shortcuts that lead to regret. As you go home for Christmas, do not be pressured by what anyone has to show off. Always be content with what you have. There is great gain in contentment. Do not meet the devil for assistance, no matter how desperate you may be. The price to pay is always more than the things you stand to gain. And don't be pressured by what other people are doing. Don't let peer pressure push you into doing something you are going to regret just to please other people.